We hold these truths to be self-evident.
It's not a rerun if you do a new intro. This is Wrestling World Domination Remastered.
Hello everyone, Bob Hazelwood here once again for Wrestling World Domination Remastered. Today's episode features our interview with Del Wilkes, better known as the Patriot. In this episode, which aired in its original form on July 2nd, 2014, Del talks quite openly about his drug use and the events that led him to spending time in the South Carolina prison system. He also talks about the origins of the Patriot Gimmick, Tom Brandy's infringement of the gimmick, and why Del's career ended when it did. As always, I'll be back at the end of the episode to provide an update on where Del is today. So, without further ado, here's Terry Garvin talking with the Patriot.
He was one of the great guys in the dressing room. You might remember him from the AWA as the Trooper, but man, does he have a story to tell, and let's bring him on and let him get to it. Del, are you on the line?
I am.
Hey, man, thanks for coming on. I'm really stoked about having you on here, buddy.
Glad to be here. Let me ask you something real quick. I caught the tail end of your conversation about Tracy. Are you referring to Tracy Smothers?
Yes, sir, I am.
Great guy. Worked with Tracy a good bit over in Japan. He came over a few tours. What's up, Jake? Called everybody Jake. Good guy. I like Tracy.
Tracy's a great guy. He's a good old Southern boy. You know, he broke in up here in Memphis with me. He kind of has grassroots like I do. He started the same way I did. I've worked with him a lot, and, you know, he's well thought of in the business, like yourself, Del. Before you were ever a wrestler, man, this is what really blows me away, is you were an All-American football player for the University of South Carolina. In fact, there's a video out there on YouTube where back in the day, in 1984, Bob Hope used to bring the All-Americans on his show. And you were in the same class as Doug Flutie, Bruce Smith, and guys like that. What was it like to actually meet Bob Hope and have him, you know, pat you on the back?
Well, it was a real neat experience. First of all, to be on the show was a dream come true because that meant you were, he had a Christmas special every December, and he would have the Associated Press All-American team. At that time, there were 5 major All-American teams, and he would have the Associated Press on every year at Christmas. So, number one, being on the show meant that you had a great season because you were a first-team Associated Press All-American. But even more importantly than that, just the chance to meet a great American like Bob Hope, just an iconic figure in the entertainment industry, but also a man that loved his country and did an awful lot for his country in entertaining troops in war zones, in tough circumstances. So, to be on the show, be able to meet him, and, to have a great memory of that.
I'm impressed with anything that you've done. I'm impressed with that as much as anything because I was a big Bob Hope fan, and you're right, man. He did go and do a lot of USO tours, and he, entertained the troops. He was an American icon. After that, when you finished playing football, you started wrestling. I guess at the AWA was your first break as a trooper. Is that right?
Yeah, I guess you could say that. I trained here in Columbia. Lillian Ellison, the fabulous Moolah, was from Columbia, my hometown, Columbia, South Carolina. And she had a school here, and I went through the school, and it was really geared more toward girls. There'd been some pretty successful girls come out of there. Judy Martin, Leilani Kai, Wendy Richter, some of those girls. But she'd never really had a guy come out of the school or the camp and make it, and or I was able to. But she would run some local shows here, and she ran a show one night at a skating rink in Columbia, and she had Wahoo come in. And at the time, Wahoo was working for Vern, booking for Vern, and working in the office for Vern in the AWA, and met Wahoo. Got to work a couple of other shows while he was down south with him that week. And then he went back up and talked to Vern, and they brought me up and hired me. And originally I just went up as Del Wilkes. But they had an idea for a character called the Trooper. And they were on ESPN at the time. Our TV was ESPN Monday through Friday from 4 to 5 o'clock. So, yeah, you're correct. And that was my first break, break to a national audience, and to work for a company, an established company like that, even though it was really at the tail end of its existence and of its run. At one time, there was not a more successful territory in this country than the AWA, and, I know you're aware of that. But it was my first break, in the wrestling business.
It had to be a great learning experience because they had some super talent up there. You were up there about the same time as Larry Zbyszko and, of course, Kurt Hennig, and heck, the list just goes on. So, I mean, you had to, go to school there because by the time that you came to Dallas in the early 90s, you were a polished performer.
Well, I was fortunate that when I worked for Vern and lived there in Minneapolis, that I rented sort of like an apartment. Brad Ringens had turned the basement of his home into an apartment, and Brad had a building that was adjacent to his home that had a ring in it, so I was able to get in the ring and work with Brad. And then they would bring in, we did more TV than we did anything else, not a lot of house shows, but we did do TV on a regular basis, and they would bring in guys like Sergeant Slaughter, and of course Zbyszko worked there, and Nikita Koloff, and got to work with a lot of experienced guys like that as well, Colonel De Beers, Baron von Raschke. So worked with a lot of guys that were seasoned veterans that were helpful in working with me and giving me pointers as well.
Absolutely. Well, the next real push that you got is you show up in Global at its inception. And a question I'm wanting to ask, and I'm sure everybody wants to know, is who approached you with the Patriot Gimmick? And when they did, what'd you think about it? I mean, did you want to wear a mask? Did you like the concept?
Well, I did. It is a funny story. I had no idea what I was going to be doing when I flew out for the very first show that GWF was ever going to run. I mean, their very first TV taping, that first weekend out in Dallas. And I had talked with Joe a lot and Bill Eadie, but still there was really no direction in what they wanted to do with me. And they just said, we'd like to have you a part of the company, and we think we can do some good things with you. So I took my Trooper stuff out thinking that's what I was going to do. And I'm not exaggerating. That Roadway Inn we stayed at there at Terry, I'm in my room, and it's just a few hours before we're to leave and head over to the Sportatorium. And Joe calls my room, and he said, I need you to walk across the parking lot. I'm in room such and such over here. He said, me and Bonnie Blackstone and Bill Eadie are in here. And he said, we got something we need to talk with you about. And I said, well, I'll be right there. And I walked across the parking lot to their room. And he said, listen, there's a guy in Georgia that just works outlaw shows. He's a weekend warrior. He's a welder or a pipe fitter for a living, but he works some of them little independent outlaw shows in Georgia, and he's works as a Patriot. And he said, this guy's never going to go anywhere with this character. And if you remember, at that time was when I say we, our military had gone into Kuwait to liberate Kuwait because Saddam Hussein had taken the Iraqi military into Kuwait and occupied Kuwait. And Joe said, listen, we really want to give you a push here. He said, we want to make you our top baby face. And he said, We think we can take advantage of the patriotism that's running through the country right now with our troops being in war in Kuwait. And wrestling's always done a great job of that, of taking the political climate and being able to create good guys, bad guys. And he said, we just think it'd be something that could really, really work for you and us. And they had a costume box that they had shipped out or either brought with them. And they opened it up, and they pulled out the tights, the red, white, and blue tights, and the red, white, and blue trunks that went on top of the tights, a red, white, and blue mask, and a red, white, and blue cape. And then he pulls out this Abraham Lincoln-looking smokestack hat that was about 3 feet tall. And he said, would you be willing to try it and do it? And I said, I'm all in. I said, but the only thing I will not do is I will not wear that smokestack hat. I said, I can't do it. I said, it's going to make me look like something out of a Dr. Seuss cat in a hat book. I said, but the rest of it, I love it. And that was it. And that night, when we did our very first TV taping, and we were having to work several times on those shows because we were doing those tournaments, and you were trying to eliminate down to the final two for the North American heavyweight title or the TV title. And when we were doing all that, when I walked down the aisle that night, those people had never seen that character. They'd never seen that gimmick. They had no clue who was wearing that mask. And, the place erupted. It just went crazy. And went out and I think I worked with Stan Lane that night maybe. But anyway, the response was just immediately unbelievable. It just got over that night with the fans and just continued to grow from there. And, of course, with them ending up with the TV spot that Vern had on ESPN, once again, I was exposed to a nationwide, if not worldwide audience that really, really, took the character to a level I really had no idea that it would go to. But that's how it started, and that's where the idea came from. So I got to give Joe and Bonnie and Bill Eady the credit for, coming up with the idea.
It's funny you mentioned that because, I was there when Global's first TV taping was. I've told this story several times, but Brian Diaz was contacted, and I was contacted and brought in, and of course I knew I wasn't going to be a star. I knew I was going to be there to basically put guys over, maybe win a few matches because I was popular in Texas at the time. And the first night I remember them calling us all into that room, that little bitty room, and having a meeting. We all crowded in there, and you weren't dressed in the Patriot outfit at that time. We were all in our street clothes. I wrestled Bill Eady that first night, as a matter of fact, and, he really liked the response that I got, so they started giving me little pushes, and I can remember sitting in the cage. I had no idea that you were going to be the Patriot because we all dressed in different places. There was so many of us. And when you came down the aisle, I can just remember thinking, my gosh, what a great thing, because like you said, Desert Storm was just really starting, and the crowd did go nuts. And man, did your work to me had improved so much. I'm not saying it was bad by any means, but you played that character great. And, I knew that there was guys there, okay, like yourself and Scott Levy or Scott Anthony, later became Raven. Even later on in Global, I knew guys like Booker T and Stevie Ray. I knew they were going to go on to bigger and better things. But, man, I thought to myself, wow, this guy was on TV every day on this time slot for the AWA. Now he's headlining the GWF. I wonder how long it's going to be before WWF comes calling. And that's my next question. Who called? Was it you went to WWF first before WCW? Is that correct?
No, I went to I went to All Japan first before I went to WCW. My last stop before I had to retire because of the reoccurring tricep problem. The last stop was the WWF, but I worked in global, I guess, until 92. And funny thing, I had gone and worked for Baba in 1990, 89 or 90 as the trooper, and I had no business being there. And I know you can relate, and the style of work that Baba's group did back then, the matches, the number of false finishes. I mean, they were long matches. They had 15-minute finishes, and it was just unbelievable. When I went the first time as a trooper, I was blown away and just really honestly was unprepared for what I was going to have to do those 3 weeks on that first tour. And so they sort of told me at the end of the tour, hey, don't call us, we'll call you, kind of thing. And I thought, well, boy, I'll never hear from them again. But then a few short years later, after I had gotten more polished and more experienced in the ring and was now doing the Patriot, I got a call from them in the spring of 92 and said, we'd like to bring you over for a tour, the May-June tour, which was a 3-week tour. And I think it was the second night that I was there, the second night we worked. Baba came to me and asked me if I would work full-time. And you know as well that in the industry, within the people that worked in the industry, like yourself and myself and all the other guys, at that time, if you could work in Japan, you could work anywhere. I mean, it was really a feather in your cap to work for All Japan or New Japan or any of the other Japanese companies. And I thought, man, I can't pass this opportunity up. And so that was the move immediately after Global, was to All Japan, and then after that was to WCW.
Okay, I saw. It's funny that I didn't know that the All Japan or the New Japan came first. I saw a match this week where you and the Eagle wrestled Gordy and Williams, and man, it was an outstanding match. And a good friend of mine, a good friend of the show's, Joel Deaton, as a matter of fact, he was over there a lot. And he said to tell you hi, and were you there the night he fell off the stage, by the way?
Yeah, listen, I was there all the nights Joel had things like that happen. You know, Joel could fall off. He could fall off buses. He could fall up buses. Joel could go to sleep standing up. Joel could fall off stages. Yeah, Joel was entertaining, very entertaining, and a great guy.
Yes, he is, man. He is one of a kind. We're kind of going to get into something, and I know that you said it was okay. This is really close to my heart because I went through the same thing, okay? Right. But several years ago, I picked up a USA Today, and there was a big article in there, okay? And boy, lo and behold, there's my old friend Del Wilkes picture, and it told a pretty doggone hard-hitting story, how you were taking up to 200 pain pills a day. And I was shocked because, you know, I mean, you're obviously every time you came to the building, you were 100%. I, myself, fell into the same thing. You know, I had some injuries. I was a little guy. I wasn't like you big guys, and I took crazy bumps, you know, to get myself over. Let me ask you this. I know from personal experience, I didn't take anything for a long time. When did you start taking pain medication, Del?
Well, I broke into the business. I probably started training at Moolah's in 87. But I didn't take my first pain pill until 1993, maybe. And I had messed up an elbow real bad, and I was having some major problems. And matter of fact, I was in between tours with Baba, And Vince had called me up and wanted me to come out on the road for a couple of weeks. Rick Martel was hurt and wanted me to take Rick's place. And, Terry, I had an elbow swollen up like a grapefruit from I'd flipped out of the ring and hit it on the floor. It just blew up on me, and I chipped bones in it. And those 2 weeks I traveled with Henning and John Nord, and I was complaining about my elbow one night in the car after the show. And Kurt said, well, don't you take something before match for it? And take something to help you sleep at night? I said, yeah. I said, I take goody powders. And he mockingly laughed at me. He said, goody powders? He said, are you kidding me? I said, well, yeah. I said, why? I mean, what am I supposed to take? He said, Percocet, Vicodin, Percodan, something like that. And I was really naive to what pain medication would do you. I thought that it would make you groggy, loopy, where you couldn't work, couldn't walk, couldn't see. I said, well, man, how do you work on that stuff? And it was just chilling now that I think back on it. The answer he gave me, he said, how do you work without it? And he gave me, I think, maybe 4 that night. Take a couple before you go to bed. Take a couple before you match tomorrow. And you'll see that you can go out and work. It'll take the pain away. And he was right. And
yeah,
that was an innocent enough beginning, those 2, which years later led to 200 a day. 20, I'd take 20 at a time, 20, 25 at a time at my worst. But that's how it started. Innocent enough, trying to go out and do my job and work and not be hampered by, a hurt elbow.
Well, man, that's chilling to me, because it's basically the same thing that I went through. I had a couple of knee surgeries, and I can remember wrestling where my knee was swollen, and they would have doctors come in and drain my knee before I, would go to the ring, and I wouldn't even take anything. I can remember after the first 2 scopes, knee scopes, I didn't take the medication that they gave me. I might have taken 1 the first day, but I didn't take any. And it wasn't until later that I was around the wrestlers, like you said, and I was hurting, and someone said, man, take this. And sure enough, the aches and the pains were gone. I had a great match that night, and it went from 1 or 2 to 5 to, I was taking sometimes 10 at a time, and 20 a day. Mm-hmm. And I understand, man. I do. I'm right there with you. I had to go to rehab I've got an addictive personality anyway, mm-hmm. whether it's whatever. If it's like right now, Mountain Dews.
Right.
I'm just that type person, and it's real easy to get into, taking something to be able to go out there and perform, which when you think about it, it's really crazy.
Well, it is, and I don't want to make it sound like I was some goody two-shoes, because even before I ever took my first pain pill, even though I worked hard and ate right and tried to look as good as I possibly could, as big as I could, as lean as I could, I wouldn't pass up an opportunity to party with the boys and everything that entailed, whether it was alcohol, weed, cocaine. I never passed up the opportunity back at the hotel to do that when you're out on the road. But for some reason, I looked at narcotic medication as a no-no. I thought, I can do this without all that stuff. And but you're right. It didn't only happen to you and I. I mean, we could literally count hundreds of guys probably that, fell prey to the same thing in that industry, because it does start out innocent enough. This is my job. This is how I feed my family. My mortgage is paid this way. My kids are fed this way. My automobiles are paid for this way. And you realize I can't do it forever, and I've got to do what I've got to do to be able to go. And, the thing that always bothered me is once I started having some very serious injuries and was trying to put off surgeries where I could keep my career going, was, man, if I take time off to have this surgery, I'm going to be out for months. And that old saying would just run through my mind over and over, out of sight, out of mind, out of sight, out of mind, out of sight, out of mind. And if I'm not on TV, if I'm not in front of the people every night, then the next big thing's going to come along, or somebody else is going to get that push, and I may never be able to recapture where I'm at. So if this is what I got to do, I got to do it, and, you know, I'll deal with the consequences later. But like you said, that's a crazy way of thinking. That's that stinking thinking, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. Did you go to any rehabs or anything?
I did, but not till after my career was over. I had got to the point, I had blown my knee out in Japan, and had to wear a brace. I mean, I literally couldn't have even ran the ropes without the brace. The brace allowed me to do that, so I didn't have to have surgery. Then tore my tricep, ripped it off the elbow, had it repaired, it ripped again, and I'm just trying to keep going. And then when I left, I had 2 stints in all Japan, and the second time I left, that's when I went to work for Vince. And by this time, when I was working for Vince, I was a full-fledged addict. I was a junkie. But once my injuries got to the point that I could not continue to go, matter of fact, I was on a conference call. It was with Vince, JR, my doctor, who was in Columbia, and then myself. And Vince said, look, Dale, he said, we've been on the phone with your doctor, and he said, he just thinks that this is an injury that you're not going to be able to overcome. And he said, why don't you have surgery, take as much time as you need to get well, and then once you're well and healed up and physically back in shape, come back to work. And if you need to, you can work a limited schedule. I got to tip my hat to Vince. He was very accommodating. And but what happened was, Terry, after the second surgery to repair the torn tricep, they went back in and reattached it to the elbow, or reattached the tendon to the elbow, had a real bad staph infection set up. I mean, a real bad staph infection, and wasn't sure I was going to be able to keep my arm. They had to go back in, clean it out, and they made another 9-inch scar on the back of my arm from the top of my tricep down to my elbow, and they left the wound open. They did not close it because they wanted it to drain, and they wanted it to heal from the inside out. And the doctor told me that it would maybe take 8 to 9 months to close. It took over 2 years for the incision to close on its own. So obviously I could not work like that. But
wow.
that's when my addiction went from bad to double bad to life-threatening bad once I got out of the business. Now, it was bad the last few years I was in the business, but I kicked it in overdrive after I was out of the business. And that's when I started calling the scripts in. I learned to speak the language. I learned that if I could get the doctor's DEA number, I could call the prescription in. I knew the terminology. I knew what to say, how to say it. And I would get by with it most of the time, but there were those times that I didn't. So I guess to make a long story short, I had, and probably only because of who I was here in Columbia, a former Gamecock All-American, a former professional wrestler, that I probably got opportunities other people would not have gotten. So I went to court-ordered rehab 3 times and then went to another rehab on my own. So I went through 4 rehabs, and those didn't work, and or at least I didn't work it right or do the right thing. But then after the 4th rehab was when I ended up finally, the criminal justice system in my hometown had enough of me. And that's when I was then sentenced to time in prison here in South Carolina, the South Carolina Department of Corrections. And
wow.
that was in early '02 when I was finally sent away.
We're going to get back to that in just 1 second, okay? I told you that, I went to rehab myself, and I did really well on the rehab for quite a bit. And, I had winded my career pretty much down, and all of a sudden my neck, basically the best way you can describe it is it just exploded. I lay down to take a nap, and man, I couldn't walk. I mean, I couldn't even move. I've got a really strange thing that where my cord canal is narrowed, and then of course I have, bone chips and spurs and everything else. So I had to go in and have a plate put on my neck, and then the pain pills came back. I had to take them again. And to be honest with you, to this day, I have to take medication, okay? But, man, I mean, I have to monitor it. I only take or try to take what I absolutely have to be able to get around. And a question that I asked the doctor, and I was really honest about this, I said, do steroids have anything to do with this injury? Because I took them. And, Dale, do you think your injuries, I'm sure you took some steroids.
Yes, I did, a lot of them.
Do you think that some of your injuries may have been due to steroids?
Well, the one that ended my career was directly due to steroids. When the first time I ripped my tricep, it wasn't the muscle. The muscle is connected to the bone by the tendon. And what happens is that the muscle gets so big from working out, and then, of course, the steroids make that muscle grow in an abnormal way as well. Well, the tendon can't support it. It gets so big, and it puts so much pressure on that tendon. And I drop-kicked a guy one night in Japan, in Sapporo, Japan, and it ripped. And so my answer, I had to have surgery once I got back home from that tour. And I had to get back as quick as I could. I tell you, the doctor told me, he said, if you worked in an office and worked behind the desk, he said, you'd be back to work in a month, 2 months. He said, but with your occupation, he said, you need to take a year off and properly rehab this thing because your job's so physical. Well, you know how our mindsets were as athletes and professional wrestlers. I thought, are you kidding me, dude? I ain't taking 9 months off. I ain't taking 7. I ain't taking 6. I said, I told myself, I'm getting back quick as I can. So I had the surgery in December, and so I doubled up on the steroids so I could heal quicker from the surgery, get back in the weight room quicker, and I was back in May. I was back 5 months later working, and I wasn't back but 2 weeks, and it ripped again. So, yeah, the steroids played a big part in that injury in particular. There's no doubt about it.
Wow. I appreciate your honesty. Okay, man, let's talk about how long were you actually in the prison system?
Well, I was sentenced to 18 months, and in South Carolina, with good behavior, if it's a nonviolent crime, you'll do 51% of your time. So I actually did about, counting the time I was in detention waiting to go to court, I did probably close to 11 months.
Wow. Well, you were a big guy. I'm sure they didn't mess with you too much, and that was, you were a hometown hero, but what a slap in the face,
It was an unbelievably rude awakening. I had been arrested over 20 times for obtaining prescriptions by fraud, and every time I would spend either a few hours or one night, in jail and then bond out and go home. But this time was different. This time I wasn't going to spend the night. I wasn't going to spend 2 nights. I was going to spend close to a year. And it was very sobering. It was just hard to believe that I had. This is where I'm at. This is for those 2 pain pills. Innocent enough that night years before have now landed me here.
Wow, man! I'm gonna tell you what. I had no idea that you were arrested that many times. Like I said, I read that article in USA Today, and I was like, oh, my gosh. I knew what I'd gone through and what a struggle it had been. And, I admire you for the way that you've turned things around, Dale. Is when you went to jail, okay, when you went to prison, is that when you said enough's enough and I'm going to turn my life around? And, that what woke you up? Is that rock bottom for you?
It was. And my rock bottom prior to going to prison just kept changing. It just kept getting lower. I would think, well, this is rock bottom. Well, no, 3 weeks later I was lower, and, the rock bottom, there was just never a rock bottom. But that was. And it was, I realized there I was forced to get clean, and I realized that if I keep doing this, there's only 2 results that are going to happen here. I'm going to be back here time and time again, or I'm going to end up dead. And I remember, and this is, I know it's hard for a parent to say this, but I've got a godly mama. I've got a best Christian I've ever known is my mom. And I remember my mom telling me one day, she said, I wear my knees out praying that you'll end up in prison. She said, because I'd rather visit you there than to have to go put flowers on your grave. And I thought, wow, that's a harsh thing to say, but looking back on it now, I'm glad she prayed that prayer, and I'm glad that was, her plea to the Lord was that, because I would rather her have to visit me in prison than to, me, like so many guys that we work with,
Absolutely, man. For fun, about a year and a half ago, my stepson was here, and I never heard of Reddit, and he's a big Reddit guy, and he said, man, let's do a AMA on you. And I don't know if you know what that is, but it's Ask Me Anything. And I said, who in the heck's going to want to hear from me? Well, he said, well, you got an interesting story to tell about all the people that have died, that you worked with. Mm-hmm. So we titled it, 40 of my friends have passed away in the last 15 years that I worked with. And, I sat and I thought about that. I'd been thinking about that for a long time. But boom, that was a really, really big response. People started immediately asking questions and wanting to know, but it's taken so many wrestlers, Dale, and you don't think when you're doing it that it'll ever happen to you.
No,
because like you said, you were taking 20 at a time. I'm taking 10 at a time, and we've done it hundreds of times. But that one time, man, is what is what's going to get you.
I did the exact same thing you did a few years back. I sat down and wrote out a list, and even though we worked together in Global, our careers, were also in other companies, and I had over 50 guys that I had worked with in my career. So between you and I, that's close to 100 names that we put down on a list that no longer are alive because of just about the majority of them, the overwhelming majority of them, the results of that lifestyle and what that business brought upon them, or we allowed it to take us to that level. And yeah, it's unbelievable. And the thing about it is, because this was the way they died, so many of them alone in a motel room away from their wife and kids, and it didn't mean they were bad people. They were good guys that were in a business they loved, like you and I love today and loved back then, and worked so hard to succeed in. And we thought that was what we had to do to keep going and to persevere in that business. And it's just tragic. It is a tragic. I know of no other occupation outside of the military, and I think I'm pretty accurate in this. There's not that many guys that played NFL football that have died over the last 15 years. The majority of them never made it out of their 40s. Boxing or any other form of work. It's just tragic, man, that so many of our buddies ended up that way.
Yeah, it is. And, I've thought about it a lot of times, what the reasons for it are. Of course, the lifestyle, and it's easy to fall into because you're traveling so much and you're away from loved ones. But a lot of times, guys do this at a very young age. And now, not in your case. I mean, you have a degree, a college degree, but they don't have the education of, making a living at other things, and they get into this wrestling, and you make some money pretty quick. Back in our days, you could make some money pretty quick because there's a lot of territories. And, that's when you not only, you've got a lot of girls that are flaunting for you. The parties are every night, or, pretty much, depending on where you are and how far away from home you are. And then you just kind of fall into that. And we don't have handlers like the boxers do, like the football people do. We didn't have anybody to bring us in, and if we didn't perform on a nightly basis, we wouldn't have a job because they would replace us in a heartbeat. So, we would take those medications, and that's certainly no excuse. I don't make any excuse for anything. But don't you think that's maybe a little bit of it?
Oh, there's no doubt that it is. And I think it's, a lot of reasons, and that's a very good reason. And others are, I think a lot of guys in that business look at it as a rite of passage. I remember when, Dick Murdoch called me and wanted me to come to Puerto Rico and work when he was booking in Puerto Rico. And I'm not exaggerating, I'm not kidding, the first thing he asked me, he said, I've seen you on TV, I've seen your tapes. He said, got a question for you. He said, do you drink, kid? I said, yeah. He said, well, I wouldn't hire you if you didn't. And, I'm sure you knew Dick. Dick was, bless his heart, he drank himself to death. And so it was almost like the guys that I looked up to, like I told you, Wahoo, God bless his heart. I have a soft spot in my heart for Wahoo to this day. A good, honorable, decent man. And I spent probably 2 years on the road with him, just being mentored by him. But, oh, my goodness, the way these guys lived. And these guys were the guys that brought me up into business. And I thought, well, I guess this is the way you live. And after a while, you think that, well, this is normal. I remember I had an episode one day with the woman I was married to while I was wrestling. And she said, I can't take this anymore. She said, we've been to 10 drugstores today, and she was taking me to the airport to get on the plane to go to Japan. She said, you pulled your pants down, you've injected both of your buttocks with steroids as we're going down the road. She said, this is insane. I can't take this. And I remember looking at her going, well, you're in a bad mood today. Because I thought it was perfectly normal. I'm looking at her like, what's wrong with you? What do you mean this is insane? This is everybody I know lives. It's normal.
Man, that is so funny because, I've been married more than once. Wrestling can definitely do that to you. And a girl that I was with in Dallas during the global days, this is funny, she walks into my house and I'm standing in the kitchen injecting myself with steroids. And she's like, oh, my God, what the? And, I just thought it was the most normal thing that there was, and I said, oh, come on, everybody does it. And I can remember her taking me to really rough parts of town to buy, 100 Vicodin or Somas or, it was crazy.
Yep.
So, man, I'm right there with you, buddy. Now, tell me this, okay? After the prison and coming out, what happened next, Al? What's your life been like since?
Well, if there's maybe been a couple of things that I've always been able to do in my life, and that is move on. Once college ball was over and I had the chance to have a couple of brief stints in the NFL, I said, I'm moving on. And I had chances to go back as free agent for those teams, and I said, no, I'm ready to go to the next chapter of my life. And once I got out of jail and my head was straight, and I said, you know what? I said, that life's over. It's done. It was good. It's like high school. It was a part of my life. It's like grammar school. It's a chapter in my life. But it's time to turn the page and go to the next chapter. And I went to work. I had several friends that were in the car business and had done very well in automobile sales. And I said, well, listen, I didn't have experience as anything else. I mean, all I'd done was football and wrestling. And I said, well, I'll give it a shot. And if it doesn't work out, then I'll try something else. Well, I've done nothing since then. And the Lord's blessed me. It's been a good business for me. It's been a good career for me. Lord's been very good to me. I recently, 14 months ago, I got remarried, married a wonderful Christian lady that was, we first met when I was 15 and she was 16 years old, and life's been good. I haven't done a lot of things with the wrestling business. I think I've been in the ring one time, maybe twice, since 2000, and actually worked. I've done appearances and things like that, and I'm not against it, but for the most part, I've not done an awful lot of that or a ton of that. I've just realized that, football, being a Gamecock, will always be a part of my life. Being a Patriot will always be a part of my life. There will always be opportunities there that occasionally will present themselves, and if it's right, I'll take advantage of it, and Lord bless me with a payday out of it. But for the most part, my life has been about moving on and just going to the next chapter. And, that's what it's been about, man.
Wow, that's great. And you've been selling cars, you told me, for 9 years at the same place. Is that correct?
Same place. I sure have. And it's good. I've got a great customer base. It helps that, again, my background here locally, a high school football star, a college football star, and, of course, the wrestling and all that has been very helpful and very beneficial. And I've done a lot of things in the media, over the years as well, local and national media and sorts like that. So it's given me a lot of exposure. And I'm, most importantly, I'm just thankful that the Lord spared my life, that I'm not one of those 40 to 50 names that you and I came up with. I'm glad you weren't able to put me on that list of names that you had, and there's not a day goes by that I don't thank Him for that, and grateful for His mercy and grace on me, because I guarantee you, I just as much as those guys that didn't make it that are on your list and my list. I mean, I should be on that list, and so I'm just very thankful that the Lord's given me another opportunity in my life, and it doesn't mean that I'm a perfect man. None of us are, never will be. But
absolutely. I'm glad that you're not on that list, and I'm glad I'm not on yours. We got a couple of callers that have been holding for quite a while. Do you mind taking a few questions?
Not at all.
Okay. Bob, who's first?
All right, we're going to bring on Ryan from Maryland. Ryan, you are on the air with Terry and Del Wilkes.
Yes. My question is for the Patriot. Do you know how Tom Brady does the Patriot Gimmick without getting sued?
I do. And I'll tell you how he does it without getting sued. I don't mean to be mean, and but I don't think I'm being critical or mean, but I think I'm being factual and truthful. Tom Brandy was a guy that never really made it very big in our business. He came over one time and worked one tour in Japan. It didn't work out very well there. He didn't get along with the guys. They didn't want him. Tom's been working a long time, but Tom was, to me, a guy that probably spent the majority of his career, I don't know, just a guy that wished he could have been more in the business, and there's nothing wrong with that. But what am I going to get from Tom Brandy, or anybody going to get from Tom Brandy suing a guy that's working high school gymnasiums and National Guard armories over this? It's, to me, it's a sad commentary. I have seen posters of shows that Tom worked on, and it wasn't Tom dressed as the Patriot. It was me. It was pictures of me, my pictures.
Oh, man.
That Tom was using either selling, promoting the show, and it does aggravate me, and it frustrates me from time to time. But, what good would anybody get out of suing a guy that's probably getting the $200 a night payday doing this? Absolutely nothing.
That's great. Great question, Ryan. You have one more quick one?
Final question. Did any promoters ever want you to unmask while you were the Patriot?
Yes. When I went to work for Vince at the end of my career, he wasn't convinced that a masked man in that day and age could get over and be popular. He said, yeah, maybe it worked in Japan and maybe it worked in WCW, but we're a different breed here in the WWF. And he goes, I just don't think it'll work. He said, but I'm willing, to give it a shot. But he wanted to unmask me immediately. And, again, the very first night, there, I got a great reception and response from the audience. And I think Vince had to begrudgingly admit that, hey, a masked guy could still get over. Now, later on, while I was working there, I did do an interview without the mask where we could see the guy behind the mask and attach a name to it, but I never worked without it. But when I first got there, he wanted to do away with the character altogether.
Thanks for calling in. You always ask great questions, Ryan. Bob, you got the next caller queued up.
Yes, we do. As a matter of fact, it is an old friend. Outlaw Joel Deaton, you are on the air with your arch nemesis, Terry Garvin, and Dell the Patriot Wilkes.
My goodness.
I just want to know one thing, Dell. You could have put me over a little more to passing out, standing up, sitting down, walking, running, eating. You know that I was always the first one in the gym and the last one to leave, that I never drank, did pills, never partied, was the first one on the bus that morning.
I think a lightning bolt just struck in Atlanta.
Hey, let me tell you a couple of funny stories real quick about Joel. Danny Crockett gave Joel some supplements one day, some chewable vitamins, right? And Joel chews a handful of them up and says, wow. He said, I can taste the protein in those things. Now, we all know protein has no taste, but with Joel Deaton, he was able to acquire taste for protein. And then another unbelievably funny story, at least it is to me, is on the bus that we traveled on. The Japanese had a couple of buses. The Gaijins, the Americans, had our own bus, and we had a VCR on it where we could watch movies. Well, we would all bring movies for the particular tour we were going to be on and watch them, and that way we could entertain ourselves on these long bus rides. Well, Joel was convinced his dog, while he was out of the house, was doing things around the house that were unseemly, maybe messing things up, getting into things. So Joel sets a video camera up and spends hours and hours of taping his dog to catch his dog doing something wrong. And the only thing the dog did was sleep, lick his crotch, and go drink water. And that was the only thing. And we spent hours trying to catch this dog doing something wrong in Joel's house. And we were subjected to this brutal boredom on the bus that Joel Deaton had brought with him.
Come on down now. You know you guys love it, especially Stan. He never said nothing bad about it.
There's two ribs about that. Wait, there's two ribs about that, okay? Number one was he wasn't trying to catch the dog. He was trying to catch his wife. And number two, he knew it was going to be boring as heck, and he was playing a rib on you guys on the bus.
Terry, you shouldn't have lost it out, man.
Whatever the story was and the motive behind it, it was brutal. I'm telling you, it was brutal. But I'll tell you something about Joel. Joel was over big time over there in all Japan. I mean, he was, man. Those people loved him. Whether he was working in a match with Stan and or Doc and Terry or me, or whether he was working in a match with Baba and the older guys, it didn't matter. Joel could adapt to anything and do anything. So, very talented guy.
That's true. I kid Joel a lot, but man, his work speaks for itself. He was a talent in the ring. I mean, if the guy would have gone to the gym occasionally instead of out chasing skirts, there's just no telling where he could have gone.
Yeah.
I keep telling Terry that when you have as great amount of natural ability as I did, you don't need all that iron, all them weights, and all that.
Just protein pills, right?
Hey, Dale, you remember, I think it was the first tour or so you were over there. I think it might have been the first or second tour or something. We was talking, about you playing in South Carolina and everything, and I told you my dad played there. You remember that?
I do. Yeah, I sure do.
And I think you was looking at me like, yeah, right, okay, I'm going to bust this motherfucker out, right? And then I think the next tour you brought the album and showed me, all the stuff on him. I guess it was some kind of book the, Gamecocks had, alumni, whatever. It was in there, but yeah, he was a Gamecock.
Yep, I remember that, and hey Joel, we had some good times on that bus, didn't we? Those are some great memories.
I know, Dale. I think about that all the time, and we just didn't know. I mean, it's all kind of surreal now, but it was, it was like being in another time or another life over there. And then when you come to realize that, it makes it more enjoyable. A lot of guys would just wait till they couldn't wait till the end of the tour when they could go back home, because it was brutal tough over there. You know that, but it's still, man, that culture and those people, it was they were just very interesting to me, and I always liked going out and seeing all the sights and stuff and doing different things.
Well,
the culture is interesting.
Yeah. Unfortunately, we lost Dell. We just lost him, and because we're in the overrun, I can't call him back. So, unfortunately,
that's terrible.
Give him a call here afterwards and apologize for the dropped call. But yeah, the call just dropped, and because we're in overtime, I cannot call him back. So, unfortunately,
it's horrible, man. I hate that.
I think either that or he got tired of listening to Joel and just hung up. One of the two. I'm not sure.
Well, that could be. I do it to him all the time.
We'd actually done a second interview with Dell in July of 2015. Unfortunately, that episode and a few others were lost forever when I had a hard drive crash. There's a lesson in that for you people. Back up your data. Anyway, Dell is now doing his own podcast called Unmasking the Truth that airs every Sunday night at 8 p.m. Eastern on Twitch and on Facebook Live. You can find Dell on Facebook at facebook.com/Dell.Wilkes.5. He's on Twitter at Dell Wilkes. You can find his merchandise page at DellThePatriotWilkes.com. We hope you enjoyed this episode of Wrestling World Domination Remastered. If so, please do us a favor and like this episode. Hit the subscribe button to be notified of new episodes, which I promise will not be as far in between as it has been since the previous show. Until next time, peace out, everyone.